the Australian Government's release of a discussion paper on safer and wider trucks and trailers, including the increasing width from 2.5 metres through to 2.55 or 2.6 metres. The ATA submission was actually put in and submitted back to the NTC. That's what we'll be discussing today, what we've put through on the ATA Council. I'd just like to introduce the people that we will be having today. I'm Angela Welsh. I'm from Straight Shot Transport. I'm currently the small business representative on the ATA Council. Today we've also got the three other people, and we're hoping we'll be able to get Thomas to come back online. First of all, I'll introduce you to Bob. He does the ATA support and the proposed safety package. Oh, sorry, I'm going straight to questions. How about we go back to their bios? So Bob's the ATA Chief Engineer. Sorry, Bob, for missing your bio. He's been involved in the road freight industry since about early 1970s. He's been doing the design and development engineering, project management and fleet coordination roles. During his career, Bob has helped revolutionise the freight and carried how the way freight is carried. I'm just trying to find the rest of Bob's. He's been involved in the design of the first Queensland B-double, the tandem triaxle B-double, the Finnemore Stinger car carrier, and 19-metre B-double. He's also involved in the first central tyre inflation systems introduced in the Australian logging, and was involved in the first meetings that resulted in the PBS. In 2014, Bob was awarded the Castrol Vecton Industry Achievement Award. Just going across now to Lee Smart. Lee's the Director of Formula Chemicals, and he's well known for his position, approach and enthusiasm. Lee founded the company in 1973 and was the only employee. Now the business has expanded across 4 factories and employs more than 40 staff. Dedicated to safety, Lee is a mentor on the WorkCover Safe Business is Good Business program and was accredited WorkCover consultant for 15 years. In 2019, Lee won the ATA's Outstanding Contribution to Trucking Industry Award, and he is past chair of the ATA Association and member association for Road Freight New South Wales. Now, I'm just going to check. Thomas, are you actually online and can we hear you? Okay, so hopefully throughout the session, Thomas will be able to rejoin us. If not, we will continue and we'll try and address as many issues as we can. And I know that Lee and Bob are well and truly up to speed with all the information that was coming through anyway. Just in case Thomas does come on, we've got Thomas is the Senior Engineer within the Vehicle Safety Standards branch of the Department of Infrastructure, Cities and Regional Development. He's led a variety of Australian design rules, projects including electronic stability control for heavy vehicles, occupant protection and other light heavy vehicle braking requirements. He's worked with standards since 2005 and is the Australian Government representative for passive safety systems at the United Nations World Forum for the harmonisation of vehicle regulations. Thomas has a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical, and this was from the University of Melbourne. So as was said at the beginning of the presentation, we'll be having a look at the differences and the need for hopefully expanding the truck widths for trailers, for trucks and hopefully trailers. But you'll all be given an option at the end of the presentations from these people to ask whatever questions you like, and we'll take it just as you decide to give it to us. So, Bob, if it's all right with you, we might just kick off with you now. And if you would like to inform people on what it is that you have to say.
Thanks, Angela. Could you just give me the thumbs up to make sure you can hear me? And
We can hear you, Pat.
great. Okay. Well, welcome, delegates. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of how and why the ATA supported the increase in vehicle width to 2.6 metres. Australia is a taker of technology, or at least much of the base design technology is sourced internationally. The current restrictive width dimension limits the adoption of technologies based on width limits up to 2.6 metres. Currently, there are only 3 rigid zero-emission models available that meet the Australian requirements, including dimensions, and there are nil prime movers. Now, the graph that you can see on your screen gives you a bit of some perspective. Red is rigid models, the black is prime movers, and so we're rating well below the rest of the world in that arena. Refrigeration. The temperature control of perishable goods in transport is an ongoing challenge. There is much promotion about climate change. Whether you're a believer or not, as external temperatures rise and heat loss of refrigerated vans increases, consignors and consignees want the product delivered in a pristine condition, and maintaining minus 18 degrees Celsius in a 35 degree ambient temperature is doable. The temperature differential of 53 degrees C. As ambient temperature increases, so does the heat losses due to temperature. How do we minimise heat loss? By achieving the best way to increase this is increasing the insulation medium and minimising potential for absorbed radiant heat. The roof, floor, front wall and rear doors are manageable, but there's some limited flexibility there. It's trailer overall length versus load length. Sidewall dimensions are constrained. A minimum internal width is required of about 2400 for the freight. External width dimension is a limitation that causes reduced insulation thickness. This is a significant constraint. These are some typical comparative loss graphs using a 40 mil wall insulation as the baseline, increasing that to 65 millimetres, which gives you an improvement in the range of about 14 to 19%. In that graph, the numbers at the bottom are the length of the trailer. So as you increase the length of the trailer, your losses through your walls increase, and that's represented in those graphs. A further increase to an insulation wall thickness of about 90 results in an improvement in heat losses of 21 to 28%. So there are other trailers. We have Prairie Wagons, currently limited to about 2 pallets inside. There's limited room for gates and gate pockets and load restraint. Prairie trailers seem to be mostly used for steel and wire, or where there's top load, and power poles, overhead crane or log fork. Volumetric bolt. The increased width results in available volumetric benefit of about 4% increase, but it also offers some stability by increasing the width and getting the wheel tracks further out. Roll stability. Maintaining a laden COG vertical height and increasing the suspension centres and wheel track centres improves roll stability. Wide single tyres and dedicated wide spring suspension centres provides further stability. Increasing the width to 2.6 metres with dual tyres will improve the static roll threshold by around 4%. Increasing the width for some commodities, bulk grains and liquids, allows trailers, that's bulk liquids, just so people are clear on that, allows trailers to have a wider load space, thus reducing the product C of G and reducing the laden COG vertical height, a further improvement in the static roll threshold. Prime mover and trailer combinations. Wider trailers should not be limited to just wider prime movers. Currently, the transport of fodder and hay to drought-declared areas allows width to be up to 2.83 metres without restrictions or special requirements on prime movers. Looking forward to the next generation of trucking, we need to think about more and more about minimising emissions. We need to be maximising safety, but we also need to be maximising productivity, all at 2.6 metres wide. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Bob. One of the questions that we'd like to actually address, Bob, if we can actually do this one now, we still have a little bit more time with your session period. The reason we're talking about the width of trailers as well as the width of trucks, can you please explain, Bob, why this is actually an issue right now with the discussion paper put forward by the NTC?
I'll give it my best shot, Angela. Currently, Australia is a world leader in productivity innovations, and minimising road freight costs component of goods is critical to being competitive in a world market. Assuming that additional width is not applied to trailers, then where the benefits of superior thermal efficiency and critical refrigerated freight may be limited to rigid vehicles. This would then result in some negative productivity for long-distance freight that may be forced from longer trailers, which may also be configured in a multi-trailer combination to that of rigid vehicles. The importance of delivering freight is ever present. Australia is at the top of the narrow-based ladder. We operate some of the highest trailers in the world at the narrowest of overall widths. This results in a double negative for static roll threshold. Increasing width allows suspension and track centres to be increased for improved static roll threshold, and load width for bulk to be increased, decreasing the load of the centre of gravity. Width also provides benefits to refrigeration.
Thanks so much for that, Bob. What we might do is we'll pop over to Lee. Let's have a look. Sorry, Lee, if you'd like to discuss how these changes, these impacts, not only are affected for your business, but for businesses generally. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. I've been in the transport and chemical industry now for 48 years, and we often struggle with the regulations that someone's written that hasn't got a lot of practical experience with it. I guess what I'd like to discuss is that we manufacture mainly corrosive chemicals here, and I have 5 trucks delivering those all over New South Wales in various combinations. Main ones we deliver are 1,000-litre IBCs. An IBC is an intermediate bulk container. These are ones you'll often see on farms, and that plastic inner bladder inside and a steel frame around the outside. Now, they're designed by the main manufacturers, which is Schultz Australia, and these IBCs can hold up to 1,900 kilos. That means the product inside would have an SG of 1.9. We mainly distribute caustic soda and sulfuric acid, so they're running on SG of about 1.53. So an IBC weighs about 1,500 kilos. So when we load an IBC with 1,000 litres of product, you get deformation of that product. Now, the IBC will swell on both sides, and depending on what the SG of the product is, will depend on how much it swells. So we load IBCs as per the ADG code, if it's at all possible. And at present, no one that I know of can load 2 IBCs on a truck and meet the requirements. So the problem comes down to how do you do it? As I said, an IBC is 1,200 by 1,000 wide, and they have to be shown when you load them on the truck as per the Dangerous Goods Code. The EIP, which is the Emergency Information Panel, the secondary closure and the valve and the label should be facing the direction of the operator walking with that forklift to either load it or unload the load. And consequently, there's some other things you take into account that you'd really like to see. The valve, which is a valve that's going to cause any problems if there's going to be leakage on the trucks. So we've got this problem. They're 1,200 now. We start filling them up, and they go wider and wider as we fill them with different SGs. If we put solvents in them, they're only 0.8 and they don't deform. We put sulfuric acid in with an SG of 1.6, they start to deform. You can go right up to 98% sulfuric, which is 1.9, and they'll deform really badly. So when we put them on, you can't fit 2 trucks. When you put them on ours, We've had our trucks designed in so that we meet an international standard, ISO 14001, an environmental standard. So our trucks are designed that they've got containment on board in case we have a leak. So there's drains at both ends of the trucks, have a small spill, they go in those containments. So in conjunction with that, we had a company called Engistics, which are one of the leaders in load restraint, to design and help work out how we can restrain these IBCs on a truck, that they'll all fit together. So when you put two of them side by side on either side of the truck and you put them in, and then you've got gates on side and supports for that, the IBC just doesn't fit. And this becomes a real problem, because then you've got to load them herringbone style. Now, herringbone is one goes one way, one goes the second way. When you put it the second direction, your EIP, which is Emergency Information Panel, which is designed for mainly emergency service. When they come to a site and you've got a problem, they can look at that panel, automatically find out what the product is. There's some codes there on how to handle it. It might be 2E, 2XE, something like that, which will give them what sort of foam they use, what sort of evacuation techniques they have to have. So they're on the outside. Now, just saying that, like Australia, we never do anything like the rest of the world. Why we always do this? We built railway lines from Queensland to Victoria, and when you came to one state, you take off the bogie and you put it on another one because someone decided not to make them right. And we do the same here. As far as I'm aware, and I'm on the NTC committee, there's nowhere else in the world that requires an EIP on an IBC, except for Australia. So here we are leading the way again for something which is nonsensical. We send a lot of ferric chloride to New Zealand in containers every week. We load those containers, we label up the IBC, we put 2 EIPs on every IBC. When it gets to New Zealand, they rip them off and throw them away. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Chemistry Australia have worked out it costs our industry in the vicinity of $90 million a year to comply with this regulation. So here we are, we've got a truck. I usually load anything between 8 and 10 IBCs on, because that maxes out our truck with the weight. We have to block our loads at the front to meet Engistics requirements. Then we put them on, and when we put them on, we can't close the gates on the side. Now, our gates are structurally made to prevent these things from falling off. Engistics reckon, and I've never tried it, we can actually deliver these products without strapping them down, because our requirements that they've designed will meet those requirements, and we won't have to strap them. I'm not game to run it past any of their weighing stations and see if I get away with it, because I don't think I'm going to. So it comes back to be a very difficult situation. Every time I send a truck out of Formula Chemicals, and I hope the EPA is not listening to this, they are non-compliant, because I can't meet the requirements of having both the EIP, the label, and the secondary closure in the valve pointing outwards. Now, if we go to a 2.6 metre wide truck, we've got enough to be able to meet that requirement. So I guess we've got two things. The NTC is looking at trying to have these EIPs removed. If you had those removed, you'd still have the problem that you wouldn't have the valve pointing outwards on the truck, and it'd be pointing in a herringbone sort of situation, so you wouldn't see it. So I don't know where we really stand on that. There's been a fair bit of a pushback by the regulators that they'd like to have the EIPs remain on the IBCs. As an industry, we'd like to see them removed, and that's right across our board. So it gives you a very difficult sort of situation. And as I said, that $90 million, I think that the Chemistry Australia worked out, I think that's an underestimate, and I reckon you could nearly double that. By the time we have to print out the labels, laminate them, secure them to an IBC, I think the basic cost is more than what they're reckoning at present. And, as I said, probably 80% of the loads going out of Formula Chemicals are all delivered in IBCs, and we try to get it right, but I'm afraid we just can't with those lower sizes we're dealing with. So if we went to 2.6, there'd be no problem. We could meet that regulation tomorrow and we'd be up and going. So when you start looking at this, then you start looking at the stability problems that are inherent with that by making those wider. As Bob was saying, we don't have that many trucks coming into Australia that meet that 2.6 wide. So what it looks a little bit funny. You drive behind a truck and you look at some of the smaller trucks, and you've got this very small wheelbase, and you've got this great big wide body sitting on the top, and you wonder, how does he go around a corner without rolling it over? If we go to 2.6 metres, you wouldn't have that problem. We'd have trucks that are designed all through Europe, all through America, all through Canada, that all meet this 2.6, and they don't have any problems with the issues. So I'm not sure why. I know our roads probably aren't the best. Someone in their right mind has put telegraph poles harder against boundaries. So we're always losing rear vision mirrors when we travel down any of the roads around Sydney. Maybe someone in the future might think, well, maybe we don't put it there. We put it on the other side of the footpath, and it might be a little bit safer for everyone involved in the transportation of it. So that sort of covers where the dangerous goods section runs into. And then I started looking a little bit further with road tankers. We've got a 10,000 litre road tanker that runs all over New South Wales. And when I was talking to some of the boys in the industry, they gave me some figures, and you start working it back. So there's an Australian standard, AS 2809, section 2.12, that talks about stability of trucks and tankers mainly. These are tankers carrying dangerous goods. So at present, with our limited width, when you sort of work out what you can do, it all based back on an isosceles triangle at the base, and depending on how wide the truck is, it's a 62-degree angle, and that affects the centre of gravity of the tank. So if our trucks become wider, we have better stability with the trucks because the tank is actually sitting lower. Now, hopefully that doesn't then encourage the tanker builders to build a bigger tanker and whack that on because they've got a high centre of gravity. But this is a problem that's going right the way through the dangerous goods area now, that we should really try, if we can, to make sure we can overcome it somehow, because no one wants to be non-compliant. You know, as I said, I've been in the industry too long now to cop fines, and I discussed that in the meeting this morning. You know, a fine for a small company, and I'm only a small company, and you know, the fines are massive in these areas for non-compliance. And no one wants to send a truck out that's not compliant. We've got to be 110%. I always say to the boys, make sure your loads are correct when you take them out. But again, I've got to turn my eye to it and say we can't possibly load them that way. So it becomes a real issue. Our trucks are short, stubby trucks. Of course, we can never load 14 pallets on it because the IBCs are just too heavy, carrying those products we carry with the higher SG. So it's a real issue, and I don't know how we overcome it unless we can get the government to say, well, we'll go to a 2.6 metre wide truck, and then we'll be fully compliant. And that's about all of my presentation. I just did have one thing that I was going to say. Several years ago, I had one of the first Hino hybrid trucks come on the market. Electric motor, big battery in it, lead acid battery at that stage they were, and we were defected by the EPA because we weren't allowed to carry dangerous goods on that truck. So I think when I had discussions with the boss of the EPA, our technology is moving farther in advance than what any of our legislation is. And somehow, I know it's really difficult, but we've got to get our legislation up to speed to say if we're going to all these trucks and all these hydrogen trucks, lead acid batteries, which seems to be, I've always thought that these are all going to be the new batteries out of the place and the lead acid ones will disappear. But the lead acid batteries have a lot of features for them that the other ones don't. And there's a lot of work now being done on lead acid batteries to bring them back into use on trucks to get the mileage out of them. So just in closing, we all struggle to try to meet the requirements. I went out before this meeting and tried to get a definitive answer off every one of the regulators, and sorry to say, I didn't achieve that at all. So here I am giving you my view of what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the chemical industry, what we do transporting dangerous goods through New South Wales. And somewhere along the line, we just got to make it simpler for everyone involved. Thank you very much.
Wow, I absolutely think there would be no one who would disagree with you about making things simpler rather than being so convoluted. Thank you so much, Lee.
No worries.
I'm actually just going to check in to see if Thomas is on the line at the moment. Are you able to hear us, Thomas? No, it doesn't actually seem at the moment like he's still with us, but hopefully at some stage we'll be able to get him on. Look, what I'm going to do at the moment, I'm just going to go for a first question. This is from, and please forgive me, I think it's Manjaranga, who is the project coordinator at Bartlett Equipment. Now, the question being asked, why in the first place Australia decided to go with a 2.5 as against a 2.6. I was once told during a technical forum that this was done to stop products from other countries invading Australian markets. Do we have any feedback for that from either Bob or Lee?
So the only thing I've found when I was looking into this is that the Australian market is so small compared to the overseas markets. No one's willing to build us something that's special for Australia. I once had a discussion with some of the regulators in regard to IBCs. Why don't we make them square? Why don't we make them the same as a pallet? Well, sorry to say, all the IBCs overseas are made that way, so they fit into containers to be shipped around the world. We can't start making standards here that no one else can work with, and we can't fit them into containers. We can't get them packed. We can't get them stowed properly, and we can't meet any load restraint regulations. So it's a bit like decimal currency. Why do we go to decimal currency? And America forgave us and said, oh, we're going to have $1, we're going to have 10 cents, we don't want 12, and away we go again. We just seem to do things different in Australia than anyone else. Now, when we're looking at wheelbases, when I was talking to some of the tanker companies that I spoke to about that, most of the wheelbases are the same. But as I said, you look at a little small Hino or a Zuzu truck, the 6-tonner, and you've got this tiny little wheelbase and a great big body hanging out there at 2.4, and the wheels are sitting underneath it, and you think, this is a kid's toy. This isn't really a proper truck. And then how do you get stability on one of those when you load it up with IBCs or, say, caustic soda? It just doesn't work.
No. And that's actually one of the things that I believe has been put through within the ATA's submission through to the NTC is we're trying to become world competitive. However, we are such a small market compared to overseas. We've got Japan, America, a whole range of different places that have different size trucks. We've also had Austroads have done a review on whether or not the 6.5 will actually be able to go on our roads in Australia. And obviously there are definitely locations where that can happen. This is something where to become competitive and make sure that our trucks that come or that we can access in Australia can absolutely include those that are up to the 2.6 metre wide. One of the things that all of us in the industry are looking at is the fact that we don't have the consistency, as was already pointed out. So the NTC is now reassessing what it is that that Austroads did with their submission is what I guess I'll put forward when they've actually had a look at our road bases and said, well, yeah, we can do it in many places. Now, Lee, if we can just go back to you for a moment. You've said about going to the 2.6. The NTC has put through some suggestions on going to a 2.55 and or the 2.6. How would that affect your business and or anybody else that you're aware of if we only went to the 2.5? The 2.55.
Yeah. Look, when you're designing these things, I often get a little bit annoyed when I talk to these regulators and you're sitting around the room, and I usually start off the conversation. I say to them, now, who's actually been in a truck? Who's seen a truck? Do you know what we're talking about? Really, if you're going to do these and make these changes, please come out and spend a day with us and see how we go. See how you load a truck. See if you can get the gates shut. You're not going to get your forklift and jam this in because you're 10 millimetres short. Give us a little bit of leeway to play with, and please understand what we're doing. I'm just about to replace a cab chassis with a new Volvo drive. I've got to order that 6 months in advance to get that out of Japan to meet my requirements, because we've got funny systems here. They don't like us cutting down chassis and shifting things around. These trucks are state of the art now with all the latest gear on. I've just replaced 2 new UD trucks now. The drivers love them. They're the best things you've ever got. They're the safest. They're safer than a car now, though. They've got every conceivable safety feature on them. And for me to get a cab chassis now, it's going to cost me twice as much as what I could pay in the past, and I've got to wait 6 months to get one. It's got to be specially built out of the factory in Japan. What are we doing here? Why can't we meet standards that everyone accepts worldwide? Why do we have to be different every time?
Well, I don't think there'll be any disagreements, Lee. Bob, are you aware of any constraints if we're looking at 0.55 as opposed to the 2.6?
Thanks, Angela. I'll try and answer this in a bit of a roundabout way, but first of all, I'll start with the current width. I can actually remember when the maximum width was 8 feet. I can't give you the years, but I do know that I think that the 2.5 came in when we changed from imperial to metric, which would have been 1974-ish. There are still areas in eastern North America where trucks are theoretically limited to 8 feet wide. I would suggest from my observation in those particular areas that the compliance is not so good. When we start talking about the width of vehicles, and I'm going to jump straight to 2.6 metres, and we get comments about, it's the widths of our roads and those sorts of things. Well, go to Europe and have a look at some of the roads over there where they take semi-trailers, and not only Europe, into the UK. And when you see grocery trucks and newsprint trucks in the middle of London doing deliveries where it takes them 3 and 4 3-point turns to back across the street and get up into a dock or something, it makes it all a little bit of a joke. So I don't see the 2.6 metres as being an issue for this country. And as Lee and others have mentioned, it's a long time we got to to be part of the international standards. As for the comment about the stock products coming in, I've been involved in having trailers built and importing them from overseas. And the 3 primary questions that the manufacturers overseas ask is how long, how wide, and how high. And we're pretty fortunate in the height area. We're higher than most countries. And getting some of those products from the manufacturing point to the point of shipping for export can be a challenge. But, the manufacturers overseas are very keen to embrace that. And I think it's a challenge for our manufacturers to not only look at the Australian market, but to look at the overseas market, because, products can be lightweight or they can be durable. You don't get both in one package. But overall, Australia has been very good at developing products that are pretty damn tough and survive our operations on less than good roads at generally speeds higher than our average in Europe. So I think that I'd be excited to see 2.6 metres come to this country, and I'd also be excited to see our manufacturers show just how good we are and get into the overseas market.
I agree, Bob.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can all agree with. If we want to be competitive internationally, we actually need to be at the same sort of level as our overseas competitors. Look, I've currently got a question from Andrew Duval. He's from the Managing Director at Duval's Earth Moving and Bulk Haulage. And Andrew's question is, Bob, are axles we get in Australia the same as other countries? Is it just rim offset that's different, or does Australia get purpose-built axles?
G'day, Andy. They're exactly the same, except they're different. All of the wheel end equipment is pretty much the same, but you're right. Mostly the axles are special for us. They have a slightly different dimension face to face where the rim mounts. So we're not exactly the same as the other countries. And, I don't know how big an impact that has on lead times, but I'm sure there is some influence there because many of those axles come from either the US or from Europe.
Okay. So I have a question, and it's possibly a technical question for you, Bob, as well. When we actually do change the axles on the vehicles that are imported from overseas, what sort of impact does that have on the structure?
It's not so simple as just changing the axles, because the vehicle and its suspension needs to be designed to suit the width.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that we can't run things like 315/80 tyres, which are a very popular steer tyre in Europe, why we can't run them on the drive here is because there's no tyre mounting configuration that allows you to get those tyres in within the 2.5 metres. And so in some areas, we're lacking access to things like tyre technology because of the restrictions in width. But the other thing is that the optimum design of a suspension, if you want to run wide single tyres, which I'm a great fan of, it's also, you get better safety and stability if you move the spring centres out so that you have a suspension and axle module that's dedicated to wide single tyres. So, it's of the trailers that I've been involved in bringing into Australia, we specified the suspension and axle prior to build, so that we didn't have to do anything like that. When they came off the boat, they were essentially ready for registration.
Thank you. That's actually really cleared that one up. I've now got a question. Oh, actually, I'll just ask Thomas, are you back online at the moment or not? Okay, what we'll do, we'll still go to another question. This one is from Edwin Higginson. How likely do you think it is that width laws will change, and how quickly could this happen? Now, this isn't a laughing matter, we're serious.
Look, I've been on standards committees over the years, and I don't know how many I've been on and how quickly we get some of these changes. Look, I've been on committees anywhere between 2 and 5 years. So I guess that might give you an idea by the time we try to get an answer and get everyone to work out. I think nowadays with these CAP committees, with everyone in every state having a say, and you've got 2 or 3 people in each state, then you've got the territories that come into it. It's really hard, get 2 people in the room and try to get them to agree on one subject's difficult. Get 18 people around Australia and get them all to make the one decision. And you only need someone to throw up and say, I don't really like that. And then the whole thing falls to pieces and we start back over again. So, look, we'd like to see this happen. I'd like to see a lot of changes that I've been working on over the years in the industry change. Sorry to say, I don't see a lot of changes. People like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You've got a 2.4 wide truck, leave it the same. What do you want to change it for? So we've got to put up a fairly good case to the government to have the people on side to say, no, this is a good idea, we'll go ahead with this, or otherwise we're not going to get anywhere.
I know that we have some PBS vehicles on the road now that are 2.6 metres wide. I'm also very aware that some of the technology that's been introduced into the military is, I don't know what you call them, but there's some sort of bomb-proof vehicles that they use that have originated out of Europe. They're 2.6 metres wide. And in the main, the average player wouldn't know the difference between a 2.5 and a 2.6 metre vehicle going up the road. And I'm a bit like Lee. I've been involved in committees for many years. We always say it takes about 8 years to fix an ADR. But this stuff shouldn't be anything like that. If we knuckle down and took the bit between our teeth, I'm sure we could make the change much, much quicker.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, my understanding is because the NTC is now actually asking for the information, Austroads have also gone through and done their assessments of our roads as well. It would look like, because we want to go to more environmentally friendly trucks, and bringing them in from overseas is a much quicker and easier way of making sure that we can achieve those. One thing we also haven't addressed so far is about the safety involved with these wider trucks. So I think when I can't speak on behalf of the ATA, but my understanding is through the submission that's been put through is if we as a country would like to meet the requirements that they're doing around the world, now's the time to start bringing in the 2.6 wide as opposed to the 2.55 and or staying at the 2.5 metres. Is there anything else either yourself, Lee, or Bob would like to add in regards to that, particularly in relation to the ATA submission?
Well, not directly to it, but I just noticed a question there from Darren Stocks, and I'm aware of the issues that are involved with mounting truck-mounted cranes. None of these are made in Australia. They're all imported. They're made for environments where it's either 2.55 or 2.6 metre width. So by going to 2.6 metres, we immediately open our market to what's available in the best technology from around the world. And I think that's very important, and it's probably not limited to truck-mounted cranes. There's a whole heap of other bits and pieces out there where increasing the width, decreasing the load C of G height is a plus.
All right, thank you. And just for those that are watching that may not necessarily have access to the question that Darren has just posed, I'm just going to read that one out. It's got, one of the other problems we face with our 2.5 regulations is around truck-mounted cranes, which is where Bob came in. Australia does not have locally made truck crane. They're all imported and are either 2.55 or 2.6, depending on the tonnage or the per metre capacity. For crane trucks, it would be compliant at 2.6 metre width. If this is required to be part of the fleet to be compliant, as none of them are now. Will the ATA work with the Crane Industry Council of Australia on this proposal? Now, I do know that part of the submission that went through to the NTC from the ATA is talking about we do need consultation, we do need all relevant parties and stakeholders to be considered, and the ease of making our roads safer, not just for our drivers, not just for our operators, but also for everybody else within the community, whether we're talking about other road users, pedestrians, or anyone else that our businesses can actually impact on. I think this is really important that we all realise that the differences in the sizes of these trucks will also then put more safety for everybody else that's involved. We just might pop over to the next question. Charlie Hussey, we've got Bob, with the shift towards the 2.6 metres, I take it that this will not include load restraint, etc., or will it?
Thanks, Angela. Good day, Charlie. The ATA submission on 2.6 metre width was a hard width of 2.6 metres. However, I think it's option 2B of the proposal, would allow for load restraint to be beyond 2.6 metres, but I personally am not aware of any limit as to what that number might be for load restraint.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I'm just trying to go through some of the notes here because my understanding is with the NTC, they're actually trying to work that out as well, whether or not the 2.6 is inclusive of either the technologies such as having better visions for trucks and then protruding from the vehicle if the trucks are actually the 2.6. So I think, Charlie, that it is a question that is going to be answered sometime, but we won't actually know what the results are until the NTC actually put that out there.
If I could just jump in there, Angela. Internationally, it's my understanding that in Europe the 2.6 metres is a hard width, whereas the equivalent of 2.6 metres, or they're 8'6" in North America, they are allowed certain other safety devices beyond that dimensional width limit.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
I think we've also got to keep up with the technology. Have a look at all the new trucks and Mercedes and stuff like that. We're getting rid of wing mirrors. We're going now to cameras. They're not hanging out the side by another 200 or 300 out both sides to clip onto telegraph poles and stuff like that. If we're going to move forward, we've got to move forward with the increases in technology, and we can't do that in Australia. All of our trucks are coming in from overseas. We've only got a couple of local manufacturers here, so I don't think we're going to take that away from them. I think our local manufacturers are pretty happy with the business that they've got now. I'm not sure if they're going to double their business or they're afraid of losing the stuff that's coming in from overseas. We all buy good quality trucks. We're not going to buy cheap, nasty things coming in overseas just to save our few dollars and think we can get them wider.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. One of the other impacts, I think, in regards to that is if we are having better quality in Australia, most people would almost certainly prefer the Australian ones because they know that those manufacturing the vehicles are also the ones who are able to very quickly be able to come back with any spare parts or fix any issues as a matter of urgency, as opposed to having to wait for everything to be imported in from wherever it was that they were manufactured in the first place. I'm just going to pop on over to Peter's question. This is something that is, I'm sure, very is a question asked by many people right now. So the idea of floating a 2.6 metre wide vehicle has been put forward at least twice before, and going back to as far as the 1980s. Underlying that first proposal was to bring in cheap 2.6 metre buses and cut out our Australian bus building industry. I think the second proposal was something similar, and certainly the arguments for the 2.6 metre wide vehicles were much the same as they are today. The principal reason both protocols were not accepted was that the increased width has a greater effect on swept path than length. Up here in Sydney, on the Pacific North, current semis and B doubles are unable to stay in the lane as they are now. Wider vehicles would be worse. The lane width, on the Sydney Harbour Bridge is 2.7 metres. Now, I know that both you gentlemen have been involved with the industry for quite some time. Do you have any comments in relation to what has been asked in this question?
I think it's a little bit hard to go back and have a look at the Harbour Bridge with just 2.7 metre wide lanes on it. If we all look back, the Harbour Bridge was designed for horse and carts, and we haven't moved ahead. We do a lot of deliveries around Sydney. Our trucks can't turn around a normal corner in Sydney without going on the other side of the lane, jumping up on the footpath, or going over a medial strip. We make them a little bit wider, we're going to have the same issues. They don't fit on the streets now. They will never fit on the streets because the streets in Sydney, as Bob was saying, are tiny. We deliveries down around the back of Balmain. You can't even drive a car down between the two streets, let alone try to get a truck down there. So therefore, when we're going to do those deliveries, we've got to put them in a smaller truck to get down there. The streets just aren't designed for it, but we can't let that hold us back with the technology and the improvements we can get by going to a better truck, better stability, and all those health and safety features that come with a new truck out of Europe and Japan and stuff that they're making nowadays. Just got to bear with it, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to back you up there, Lee. In regard to the comments about swept path, if we increase the overall width by 0.1 of a metre, we'll increase the swept path by 0.1 of a metre. The big issue is that a driver can't consistently drive that accurate. The other thing is that in designing roadways and what have you, we have tools available to us like path program and other similar programs, and the design requirements out of those are that you should then add another 0.4 of a metre on either side of the prediction. As for the comment about the 2.7 metre lane widths, well, I don't know what the lane widths are on the Harbour Bridge, but like Lee said, we've got lots of B doubles running over there now, and if we look at the PBS level 1 and 2 tracking ability in a straight path, it's about 2.9 metres. So on that basis, then the Sydney Harbour Bridge doesn't comply.
Look, I guess it's all brought out. We've just had North Connect with their tunnels, build them. They're fantastic. I've been working for years to try to get some sort of ability that we can transport dangerous goods through these tunnels. They're done overseas in every country, all the way through Europe and stuff like that. We take dangerous goods. Look, some of them you won't put through there. I don't expect you to ever get explosives to go through a tunnel. It's not a good idea in case something goes wrong. But, we mainly carry Class 8s. They're corrosives. They don't catch fire. They burn you if they get on your skin. But if they're designed correctly, we don't have a problem. Now, most people will know there's an underway underneath Mascot Airport out there. There's a tiny little section there. We can't even run a truck with dangerous goods under that open section that's probably 200 metres wide because it's classified as a tunnel. So here we are putting heavy vehicles that are carrying dangerous goods through all the side streets around Mascot and that, trying to avoid all these tunnels, where if they built the tunnel correctly in the first place, we wouldn't have these issues. So here we are again, putting a brand new tunnel, costs us a fortune. Truckies don't have any alternate. All the dangerous goods, where are they going? Up Pennant Hills Road. And if you drive up Pennant Hills Road, every tanker is caustic or petroleum or something that's horrible. I bring all my hydrochloric acid down from Queensland every week, so I get 3 tankers carrying 30,000 litres of hydrochloric acid. Where's it go? Down the main street of Pennant Hills, past every one of those schools, every one of those, and they say, It's not so bad. But we've got to stop every time at every red light. You've got all those stops that they're trying to overcome by having it the other way where you don't have those accidents. As soon as we stop, we get some idiot run up the back of us, or someone wants to jump in front of us to be the first one off of the set of traffic lights. So here we are right now building a new set of tunnels, and we can't get it right. I've been fighting with Transport New South Wales. We're about to do a bypass up at Coffs Harbour, and it was going to be a cutaway. What have they decided to do? Put tunnels in. So where's our dangerous goods trucks going to go? Transport Management Australia did a project with Transport New South Wales to see where all the dangerous goods. I had something with my small fleet doing something like 22,000 different routes around New South Wales transporting dangerous goods. Wouldn't it be good if we could keep them to the main highways and not use all the back streets? It'd be a safety issue straight away. But you reckon we can get anyone to make that decision? All too hard for them. All too hard. I keep on getting the answer. We're looking into it. It's the biggest hole you've ever seen. They can't find the bottom yet.
All right, so I'm just actually going to point out for anybody who doesn't have the comments open, Thomas Belcher, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get him online, but he's kindly provided a presentation which is available at the bottom of the sessions below, so you will be able to access after this discussion to find out Thomas's take on the ADRs, I believe will be that need to be looked at, a number of the other legal issues. Just waiting on anybody else who might have some more questions. I'm just wondering if either Lee and or Bob would like to address any of the additional safety components that will come into effect should we get the wider 2.6 metre trucks and hopefully trailers coming in as well. I'm looking more at things like our refrigerated vehicles and having the thickness actually be able to be what it should be in Australia with our additional heat. We've also got additional harnessing that could be if people are high up on the trucks. At the moment, we can't put different restraints on for people working at heights because of the way the vehicles are. Are there any other safety issues that the 2.6 metre trucks and trailers might be able to help address, apart from for our truckies? And I'm very, very happy should this happen. For our truckies, having the 2.6 metre wide cab would absolutely mean a bigger sleeper area as well. And given our fatigue issues, whilst that's not to do with a whole range of the reasons why the NTC are looking at the wider trucks, as a truckie, I'm pretty sure people would be stoked to have the extra space. So Lee or Bob, do you have any additional information?
Yeah, I think you're right, Angela. We've got to look at our drivers. You know, they're the main part of our business nowadays. And, you know, if you're looking at their comfort and that sort of thing, I think that's what you look at. You know, when I went out and looked at these, buying these new UD Volvo trucks, what I was looking for is for the comfort of the drivers. They're doing 14-hour shifts in it. That's more than you sit on your bum at home watching TV overnight. So these blokes are out there every day bouncing up and down. You do the roads around and they don't talk about infrastructure. The roads are atrocious. They're all breaking up. There's holes in them. They're all cracked up. I do a regular trip down to Canberra and, you know, along the lake there, Lake George, the road's atrocious. I keep on thinking there's something wrong with the car. It starts vibrating and shaking. It's the worst road you've ever seen. And it's a concrete road that should be nice and smooth. So when you're putting a driver down there every day and he's putting up with this and he's putting up with the temperatures, you've got to give them something decent to, as we said in one of the other sessions, how do we attract drivers into our industry? They just won't come here. They want to see the technology on the trucks. You know, they want to see things like electronic work diaries, which we've had since December last year, which is the best thing that's ever come into our market ever. Now, look, I'm an old bloke. I don't like it. I like a bit of paper and a pen and paper so you can write things down on a hard copy. But our drivers have all taken to it, and they think it's the best thing. It gives them the breaks. It gives them all their checks before they start. They can't do anything wrong. You know, when the driver's doing 14-hour days, oh, when's my next break coming up? Oh, geez, I missed that one. Oh, fudge the book. Hang on, I'll get my ruler out and shove that one back again and have a break back here again. And that's when they get caught.
I'm sorry, Lee, that doesn't happen ever.
No, it never happens. No.
No. I would like to actually just read out the comment from Majoranga. He's got, sorry about bombarding the questions. It's never a bombarding. Any questions, happy to answer them. We need to talk about trailers as well, and if we get the additional 50 mil on each side, after leaving the 2400 mil for 2 pallets side by side, we've got ample room to provide effective fall prevention devices for workers working at height, and that is absolutely spot on. The number of risks that our drivers are currently taking. Bob, I believe this is one of the areas that has been discussed at length as well when we're talking about palletising and putting the pallets on the trays of our trailers. Is there anything additional you'd like to include in that particular question point made?
Bob, I know everyone's worrying about bringing these cheap trailers and trucks and stuff. Don't they have to meet this thing called an ADR? Aren't they supposed to be specifications that come into Australia? You just don't bring in a shonky truck that's made out of a bit of tin metal and you put it on the road and you load it up and it all falls to pieces when it goes down the road. Don't they all have to comply? Bob, you know these rules and regulations. These are the all ADRs. You do something wrong with it, you don't get the truck approved and it doesn't come to Australia. So it's got to meet our standards.
That's correct, Lee, and that also applies to anything you bring into the country as at today. The additional width on trailers will be beneficial to things like Prairie Wagons, which the concept was originally designed for 2.6 metres. It's been modified to try and suit what we do with some of those products in Australia. And as a result, there are many restrictions, including the availability or the scope to put gates inside them, which we do need with some products. But in regard to the mandatory requirements for these wider trailers, there are proposed, I think it's 5 new ADRs, which will be mandatory for all trailers that are wider than 2.5 metres. And, I'd just like to run through and give you a bit of a quick overview about these. They're not in order, but the first one is ADR 106, which is side underrun protection. Now, operators and contractors recognised the potential safety benefits of side underrun protection in 2009 in Australia. And the Industry Technical Council developed and released a side underrun protection technical advisory procedure, but it was applicable only to trailers, and that was released by the ATA in 2012. In 2018, the TAP was expanded to cover trailers and plus rigids and prime movers at the request of industry. And that was from a lot of the major construction projects that were happening in the capital cities. However, the TAP that we released in 2018, and there's been a couple of minor editorials to it since then, has several modifications and variations to the European Regulation 73 to better suit the day-to-day operating conditions in Australia. So one of those things was we allowed a gap in the side underrun protection to allow the driver easy access up onto the chassis deck for connecting up trailer services, airlines and electrics. The next one is ADR 97, which is advanced emergency braking. It's primarily based around trucks and trailers with compatible braking technologies. ABS and EBS was not mandated on new trailers in this country until the 1st of November 2019. And whilst we accept and hope that AEB intervention should be the exception, not the norm, operators need the option of selecting the ABS system output subject to whether the trailers being towed are smart or dumb. The system default reset should be for smart trailers, and remembering that if a driver intervenes in the response to an AEB alert, the AEB braking system is disabled and it won't reset until the driver fully releases the service brake. Then there are 3 other ADRs, which is ADR 1403, which is direct devices for indirect vision, i.e. rear vision mirrors, and that proposes to pick up UN Regulation 46. ADR 99 is lane departure warning systems, and that proposes to pick up Regulation 130. And ADR 105, which is blind spot information systems, which you touched on earlier, Lee, which picks up Regulation 151. Now, these proposed ADRs provide a pathway to allowing vehicle manufacturers and operators scope to adopt these important safety technologies and systems.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. That has actually really cleared up quite a fair bit when we have to look at the ADRs that do need to be addressed and attended to make sure that we can get the best and the safest industry we possibly can.
Just one thing in closing. I've got these 2 new Volvo trucks that have come into Australia now, and it just disappoints you how they've been rated down in size. Australian requirements, 6 tonne on the front axle. If you're lucky, you get to 6.5 if you belong with the NHVR, and 17 on the back duals. When I have a look at the specifications that comes out for Volvo, the truck's designed to carry 8 tonne on the front axle and 20 tonne on the back. We've lost 5 tonne carrying capacity because we're meeting some archaic requirement by the regulators in Australia. Why are we doing it? If the truck is rated overseas, this is what it's doing overseas. This is what it does all through North America, and Europe, and we bring it out here and we take 5 tonne off the load. If you took 5 tonne off every load, we're only carrying 5. I can carry 10 or maybe 12. That's 50% of my load. I could increase the capacity of my truck and fill the darn thing up, and I wouldn't be doing so many trips up and down the highway. And I don't know how we get those things changed. These are basic sort of things that are out there, and just shows how difficult we are in Australia that we can't meet the requirements for overseas. If the truck's designed to do those weights, let them do those weights. Don't grade them when they come into Australia and say, well, for safety reasons, we're only going to give you 6 tonne on the front axle and 17 on the back, and we've lost 5 tonne carrying capacity. I just can't believe some of these things when I look at them and think how to get some common sense into this.
Amen to that. One of my questions, I guess, would probably be, are our roads up for the heavier weights?
Well, don't forget, this is only a small truck I'm running, it's only carrying, 15 tonne on product. You got these PBS trucks that are running up and down the highway carrying 60 tonne of product. Is my little 15 tonne going to do more damage with a different wheelbase on it than a semi-trailer with a longer wheelbase? I'm not sure. That's a question for Bob, and he's probably got an answer for you. Bob?
Thanks, Lee. I was waiting for that. Look, one of the limitations that we have with axle weights goes back to the Roval report, I think it was, of about 1985, and it looked at tyre pressures and the impact of those tyre pressures on the pavements that we have in this country. Now, a lot of our pavements are referred to as thin chip seal, I think is the terminology. And look, I'm not a road engineer, but in conjunction with those tyre pressures, that's the limitation on the axle loads. The other issue that I think would stem from that issue is that I would love to see, I'm with you, Lee, I would love to see all of that sort of stuff increase, and with some of my involvement in the aviation industry, the aviation industry is very fortunate. They've been allowed to build bigger and bigger aircraft, but it's certainly an industry I wouldn't like to be in at the present time. But we need to do something about finding some middle ground between where we are now and the best of these technologies. It's important to us. We've got a situation where we had a road train notice which was recently released by the NHVR that allowed certain road train prime movers up to 7.1 tonne on the steer axle. Now, the reason for the 7.1 tonne is the fact that they need it. A lot of them are up there now, and Northern Territory has had a permit system for higher weights on the steer axle for quite some time. But in the release of this, we keep talking about national uniformity. The national uniform road train notice wasn't uniform in that it's only available to prime movers in Queensland that have a wheelbase of a minimum of 5 metres. Now, no cab over truck in general service has a wheelbase of 5 metres. So therefore, we just discounted all of those trucks that have got all of the safety technologies available to them, but they can't participate in the 7.1 tonne. It's a crazy environment that we're working in, and we keep talking about uniformity, but the only thing that's uniform is the fact that it's not uniform.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I think there'll be quite a few people cheering right now on that comment, Bob. You're absolutely right. One of my pet peeves is that nothing is uniform in our country.
Yeah, and it seems that Newton's law of gravity is different in different states because they come up with all these weird ideas, and it frustrates the hell out of me.
Well, just to follow on from that, we actually do have a comment from Craig Day saying our regulators don't understand the environmental costs of what we do in the summertime for refrigerated freight. Sorry, I do apologise, Craig. It's not actually related to what we we're just talking about, but it is also very apt with the regulators not understanding things and what happens within the industry. So we're looking at the summertime refrigerated freight with the current limit of 2.5 metres. The fridge plants use almost as much fuel as the prime mover, just keeping fruit cool between the producer and the consumer. The 2.6 would provide a distinct environmental advantage. Now, that's also something that we're going for overall, is better environmental advantage and being able to import additional trucks that are electric. And one of the things at the top there, though, the regulators don't understand. How do we go about making sure our regulators do start understanding the needs and the benefits to the country?
Well, if I jump in there, Angela, maybe if they read the on-demand presentation that's available on TMC about refrigerated trailers, they might get a little bit of an idea of the benefits of what colour can do for refrigerated trailers and what insulation in the walls can do. It's a good presentation that was put together by Greg Brown from MaxiTrans, and I'd urge people to go and have a good hard read of that because, again, I'll refer to the global climate change, and whether you believe or not, if our summers keep getting hotter, instead of having ice cream, you're going to have milkshakes.
I think it's probably irrespective of whether regardless of whether it is or is not an issue. At the moment, Australia does get hotter than our European counterparts, and yet we still don't have proper refrigerated trucks without causing additional issues to the environment. So it does make sense to have better refrigerated vehicles, which then does benefit everybody.
Again, we're a taker of the technology. There are none of those units that originate in this country, and if we start trying to have refrigeration units to do those tasks, you're probably going to drop off a couple of pallets.
Yeah.
I think one of the most difficult things with our industry is we're so over-regulated. Bob, you're saying you're involved in the aviation industry. I don't think it could be as bad as what the transport industry is. How many regulators we have. I was actually looking through to hoping that the NHVR will come to New South Wales, but then all the other regulators drop off and go away and do something else with their time. Now, at present, we've got the EPA looking after dangerous goods, etc. Then you've got the Highway Patrol out there, you've got local councils, you've got NHVR, you name it, everyone's got his hand in the pocket. They all go out and they do a 4 or 5 hour course on dangerous goods, and these blokes are out there trying to control the regulations. Here we are again with so many different interpretations. Can give the book to 4 or 5 people, the Bible, we've got the ADG code. Sorry to say I'm not an idiot, but I can't read the bloody thing. It's absolutely hopeless. You've got to have a bachelor in, I don't know, to be able to read it and understand it. You can do these things and you find 2 pages that are relevant. You say, oh, that's applicable to my business. I can do that. But, it just makes it so difficult. It really does, and you're just hoping that sooner or later we do get some uniformity and the NHVR takes over and they have the same format for every state. So when our driver doesn't drive into Victoria, we do deliveries to Albury or Wodonga. We're all right when we're in one state, but we've got a river between us. When we go over, we're in Victoria and we come over to a different set of rules altogether. And does our driver know those? He did his DG licence up here in Sydney. He didn't do it in Victoria. So we're in breach of any regulation when he drives over, 10 kilometres to go into the Mars factory on the other side of the river. It just makes it so difficult. And the same, I don't know how we ever get uniformity. We've gone too far down the track and just taken different pathways, and they're all leading in the wrong direction, I'm afraid,
Hi, Angela. I'll just jump in there. I'm getting the signal for us. We're on time, so.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left, so if anybody has any additional questions, we'll try and get to them. One of the questions here from Garth Middleton, is there still scope from the NTC to understand if or how much GVM increase would occur as a result of wider vehicles? For example, further consideration for axle load limit changes. Bob, I think that might be...
Bob, your answer's yes. Bob?
Yeah, look, I've had a number of these discussions with Garth, and I touched on it when I spoke about steer axle mass limits and tyre inflation pressures. But look, as we uptake more and more technologies in these trucks, there's certainly going to be some need for an increase in mass somewhere, otherwise it's going to be taking out of the payload. And if you do that, it'll be a disincentive for people to take up the technologies.
Okay. This is one that I think is probably really important to address again, where Peter has come back again stating, I expected that you'd jump up and down on me about the Harbour Bridge example, but you're overlooking that most road systems in our major cities are designed for 2.5 metre wide vehicles and shorter lengths than what our current vehicles are today. The rest of the road using population should be allowed a level of safety and free use of the roads without having to keep away from trucks because they fear for their safety. Now, Lee or Bob, is there any comment you'd like to make on that statement?
I'll go first.
Sure.
I'd like to know what percentage of the roads in this country were originally developed and brought into service prior to 1974, because that's about the time when I believe trucks changed from 8 feet to 2.5 metres. So it's, there was about a 2.5 inch increase in that change. We keep wanting to live in the past. We can't do that. We've got to keep moving forward. And if the population of Australia doesn't like productivity and putting their cornflakes on the shelves at the lowest possible price, well then we could go back to some FB Holden utes and we could chuck a couple of cartons of cornflakes in the back of a couple of hundred of those to do the daily delivery to the Woolworths store down the road. We need to think about the future, we need to plan for the future, and we need to start getting the advantages. In the main, transport distances in Australia are about 5 times the average transport distance in North America and Europe. We can't put it on rail. I'm yet to see a supermarket that has a railway siding at the back of the supermarket. So no matter how you transport the freight, at some time it's got to go onto a truck. And I just think that the trucks now are much, much safer than they were 20 years ago and 30 years ago. And, I can remember driving a 1964 Shoebox International, and the brakes on it were, a bit akin to throwing the plough anchor out the back and waiting for it to take up the slack. So we've got to adopt a much more positive attitude. The operators that are out there are keen to take up the technology. They have shared the benefits of the technology and the productivity with the population of Australia, and that's how we need to continue to do it.
Look, I fully agree, Bob. One of the things I can't get over is that we have to share the roads. And sorry to say, you're going to find a truck on the road. And my wife gets scared when she goes past a semi-trailer. She doesn't like them. So what does she do? She takes care and she moves over. Now, she's got a little tiny car sitting in a big lane, and she's got plenty of room to move over if the truck's anywhere over. Now, these UD Volvo trucks I've got, they've got lane changing on them. Our driver starts wandering into a different lane and beep, 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 shake the seat and virtually throw you out of the door by saying you're driving in the wrong lane, get back where you are. If we take up the technology and move forward with this stuff, Don't keep on saying, I'm going to drive around in a 1970 car. You don't drive in a 1970 car anymore. You get rid of it and you've got a nice current car that's got all these abilities on them. Look, as I originally said, these trucks are better than cars. They've got more safety features than cars nowadays. They're fantastic things. I couldn't believe these Volvos when I got them in here. The best thing since sliced bread. And I'm not just pushing Volvo because I got a nice jacket out of it, but I did get a nice jacket as well. But I'm just saying, you just got to look at them and say, the technology's moving ahead and we're not. Please make allowances for trucks. You're going to see them on the road every day. As Bob said, every piece of item you use at home has got there somehow on the back of a truck. Take the trucks off the road and give them restrictions like we do now, and you can't drive down this road and you can't drive down that road. You won't get the deliveries, and we won't have any goods in any of the supermarkets. And they'll be worse than what they are now. You're never going to get that roll of toilet paper.
All right, look, we've actually come to the end of this particular session, but I would actually really like to thank Peter for putting that last question out there. It is something that I guess we haven't really addressed, and that is the other road users. However, with the capacity to have the wider trucks, it also allows for the additional safety and security measures put in place, particularly the safety vision. That will then make things even more safe for our other road users as well. But there are so many of us, or so many people that are concerned about sharing the roads. We need to have better education systems all around on sharing our roads safely. Having these wider trucks will actually provide more benefits and more safety to everybody that is a road user, and to our drivers, and to our industry, and to everybody else. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Lee and Bob for all of their information. They're both very knowledgeable men. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have Thomas as well. But thank you all, everybody, for participating in this particular session, and we look forward to having any more questions from you in the very near future. Thanks so much,
Angela.
everybody.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.